So actually, I have some good news for everyone, which is nice. It's always nice to have good news and a bit of a white pill, something positive to tell people. And the Dutch farmers, excuse me, have organised and struck back against the unremitting tyranny of the Dutch Parliament and the government. Now, you might be like, well, hang on a second, the Netherlands. Tyranny in the Netherlands. But yeah, Mark Rutte does appear to... He was became Prime Minister in 2010. He appears to have become a WEF stooge. He's one of those penetrators of cabinets that Klaus Schwab has told us so much about. You may remember him receiving Klaus Schwab's latest book and writing back to him saying, thank you for this wonderful book. I love everything in it. Mwah, 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 mwah.
And then being like, but I've never read it.
Yeah, but I've never read it, yeah. And so,
who is Klaus Schwab?
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. But we are going to do exactly what the WEF wants, which is to kill all the farming in the Netherlands, which is a good idea. And
eat the bugs to change the weather.
Yes, that's precisely Mark Rutte's position. I believe he formulated it exactly that way as well. So before we begin, if you want to support us, go over and watch our Epoch series. This is in no way related to the subject. It was just one I really enjoyed doing because I didn't know anything about the Alamo. Do you know anything about the Alamo?
I know about the phrase. I watched a couple of videos on it once, but I've forgotten everything.
Exactly, because to anyone outside of Texas, this is a very, very small deal. But it's a very interesting event in Texan history. And also we cover how Texas became a part of America rather than Mexico. Spoiler alert, it was mass immigration.
Yeah.
I didn't
Loads
know
of
that.
Americans moving into Mexican soil.
Yeah, because it was
God.
underpopulated. The Mexicans were like, well, why don't we invite those English settlers over? Because they're really productive.
So what if loads of Mexicans turned up in America? I'm sure that would have no possible side effects.
Looking forward to California flipping, to be honest. California is literally going to double the Mexican GDP. Hilarious.
They'll improve the place.
Yeah. Wow, will it?
Yeah.
No, you'll have to deal with Californians. Anyway.
I don't know. I feel like Mexican cartels are more bearable.
Well, exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to the Netherlands. So, just to frame this, the Netherlands is the second largest agriculture exporter. That's massive, right? That's absolutely massive. This accounts for 100 billion euros in the Dutch economy.
The swamps be paying, huh?
Yeah, exactly. They literally, the swamp Germans are making bank. It just comes out of the soil, Callum. It just grows.
Get some chickens. It comes out their arse.
No one's going to get that joke. But it's just, the reason that Dutch farming is so good is because of innovation. They spend a lot of money. In fact, 2% of their GDP is spent on agricultural innovation to continue making this very tiny plot of swampland.
You mean they didn't think, hang on a minute, who's going to pick the crops? That's important loads of foreigners. They were like, what if we build a machine that picks crops?
Well, they have imported loads of foreigners.
They haven't done it for the machine.
Not for agricultural reasons.
I was going to say, I don't remember seeing those images.
No, but they have imported loads of foreigners, but they haven't done it for agricultural reasons. But this is a key aspect of why Dutch farming has become a bigger part of their economy while spending less resources on it, right? Very, very, very clever stuff. But this...
It's not that clever.
It is. It's
What
clever.
if we invest in our future?
No. But I could have gone into it more. No, they've got like loads of different like advanced techniques for farming. I don't know anything about farming.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the difference. The thing I find really annoying with other Western countries.
Yeah, go on.
Ross, I mean, I went over this once.
We've got Jeremy Clarkson. The Dutch have science, okay?
No, but the point being that you remember there were a lot of farmers during the Brexit debate who were arguing that we need immigrants to come here and pick our crops. It's like, why can't you just build a machine that does that for cents on the dollar?
Good question, yeah.
No, can't do that.
Why can't we do what the Dutch did? Yeah, exactly.
It's like innovation, not here. It's a real problem with the UK.
It is, and that's why I like it. But anyway, the problem with this, though, is that the Dutch have, I think it was something like 2.5 times the number of livestock in the Netherlands than we have in Britain. And so one of the problems is waste runoff, which contains nitrogen. And as we're told, what's all the fuss about nitrogen? The nitrogen pollution allows for nitrogen-tolerant plants to survive and outcompete the more sensitive plants and fungi. And so this affects, quote, biodiversity. You remember we went through this with the WEF a while ago, going like, well, we need increased biodiversity. It's like, do we?
And after watching Clarkson's farm, I'm very much of the opinion that the farmers can probably manage it.
Yeah. But the point is, you don't get enough algal blooms. Oh, sorry, no, too many algal blooms.
I get plenty of meat.
Yeah. Well,
It's kind of important.
We get to live in comfort and prosperity, but not enough different kinds of fish in the lakes. So that's a problem. And apparently it's also a greenhouse gas, but I mean, no one really believes that that's an issue. So they put the focus very heavily on biodiversity. Right, and so the Dutch government was like, yeah, so what we're going to do is kill all the farmers, their business anyway, and we're going to reduce the amount of livestock they're just allowed to have. He's not allowed to be a farmer. It's not on.
Trust us, the government knows best.
They decided to try and buy out the farmers, who to reduce the levels of nitrogen. And it's like, yeah, okay, so we're just going to start attacking the food supply of the country. Where have we seen that?
God, don't worry. We live on an on-demand world, as Theresa May said. if we ever need to buy something, we'll just buy it from abroad.
They started doing this because the Dutch government found in 2019 that the government was the highest Dutch administrative court found that the government was breaking an EU law by not doing enough to reduce excess nitrogen in vulnerable natural areas because of the biodiversity. Right. So the EU have got a law saying
you're making too much food.
Yeah. It's reduced the number of different kinds of fish in this swamp, and you should be taking care of the biodiversity of your swamps rather than feeding people. And so the Dutch were like, good point. We've signed up to that because we're a part of the EU and we have to do what you say. So the Dutch government's like, right, so we have to start essentially dispossessing the farmers. They have this 13-year plan, which includes paying some Dutch livestock farmers to relocate or just exit the industry, and or to change methods of farming. As the Guardian report, it will start as a voluntary program with compensation offered to livestock farmers asked to leave. In the end, it might be necessary to stop negotiating as a last resort, but the basis is voluntary, said one government official. Moving forward to this year, the Dutch government apparently the end of last year, they have this 22 billion to buy the people out, more than 100% of the value, right? So it's actually not a bad deal. But the nitrogen minister, Christian van der Waal, they have a nitrogen minister, right? This is his entire job. Measure the nitrogen in the swamps, right? He warned, there's no better offer coming. It's like, presumably in a gravelly voice.
Yeah, I mean, they all seem to have that.
Yeah, but just staring them in the eyes, and there's no better offer coming. Take this. Or it sounds like a mafia.
Eat the bugs to change the weather.
Exactly. And if the farmers ignore the offer, the Dutch government will begin a program of forced buyouts next year. There's no better offer coming. And so Reason pointed out that, look, this entirely seems to be by design, which it is, obviously. The Dutch government is doing what the European Union wants, which is what the WEF wants, which is to make sure that we are all completely dependent on foreign imports. I won't go through this just because we're running out of time. It essentially covers what I've done. And so the Dutch farmers were up in arms about this. Practically a full revolt since about 2019. We've covered this before, so I won't go into too much depth. You can go read the Wikipedia page. It's actually fairly accurate as to what's happened. How many people did we see at the protest? I mean, it was huge numbers, wasn't it? Huge numbers.
Couldn't even remember how many.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands, probably. Massive protests. And you saw lots of people on the bridges over the motorways supporting the farmers and stuff like this. And it was very, very wholesome. And it's good to see that it's getting results. Because there was a protest recently that was getting water cannoned by the Dutch police. So you can see that the tensions are rising. Things are getting bad. If you can go to the next one, just you can see the Associated Press. There was a demonstration outside The Hague and they got water cannoned. Because why not?
Ironic.
Dutch farmers. Do you remember they had cows dumping manure there and stuff like this?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was all good stuff. So yeah, this is the Dutch government, being like, hello, fellow citizens. Suck it. But then it turned out that there are elections in the Netherlands still.
Wait, people still get elected?
Apparently so.
Crap.
We recently had the Dutch provincial elections, and this was on the 15th of March 2023, and there you can see that Mark Rutte there, the current Prime Minister of the is it People and Democracy Party or something like that, has been ousted or knocked down to second place at
Jesus
nearly
Christ.
2-1 margin.
Who's that new party?
Yeah, that is the question. Who are the
138
BBB?
seats.
Yeah. Who is Caroline van der Plas? What does BBB stand for? Well, when translated...
It's not Build Back Better, is it?
No. When
We'll start speaking English.
When translated into human language, I can't even
Out
pronounce
of
it.
swamp German.
Yeah, out of Swamp German. The BBB stands for the Farmer Citizen Movement, which won nearly 20% of the entire vote. Now, I'm not an expert on Dutch politics, so feel free to correct me in the comments and fill in any of the
Well, that's
gaps.
amazing.
Well, that's amazing for just generally. I mean, that would be incredible in British politics, where we're basically a two-party state. But as you can see, in the Netherlands, they have 49 parties. Right, the Dutch politics is incredibly fractured because they have proportional representation, and so you end up getting coalitions of governments. And winning nearly 20% outright is effing incredible. That is an insurrection by the farmers, which is great to see. So we were big supporters of the Dutch farmers, obviously. And so watching them win a victory like this is just fantastic. So the Farmer Citizen Movement was founded in October 2019 by an agricultural marketing agency and agricultural journalist, Caroline van der Plas, in response to the widespread protests. They only won one seat in the 2021 general election, but these are the provincial elections, so it's a hell of a movement, right? But this apparently means, and like I said, I don't understand the Dutch system very well at all, but according to Dutch people on Twitter, this is good news. So the final vote's been counted. The BBB, the Farmer Citizens Movement, gained a staggering 17 seats, and the ruling parties have suffered severe losses and won't reach a majority, not even with the help of the Green Party and Labour. So that's a complete upending of the Dutch sort of political landscape, which is great. Apparently, if you go to the next one, it was the highest turnout in years, highest turnout in 30 years, which means the Dutch voters are just like, yeah, no, we've had enough of this, actually. Which is great. On voting day, apparently 61% of Dutch people turned out. So still 40% of Dutch eligible voters were like, yeah, I'm okay with WEF tyranny. I've got better things to do. Like, just wade in the swamps.
Whatever Dutch people do.
Yeah, I don't know what they're
Eat cheese.
Yeah. Like, try and touch the ceiling. I don't know. Like, try not to bang their head on the door. Whatever Dutch people do. Tallest people in the world. For some reason. Why?
Do you think it's the milk?
I think it's the
We always talk
I
about
think it's
the
the milk and the beef.
Yeah.
So they eat a lot of cheese. And, I mean, I eat a lot of cheese, but I'm not very tall, so I don't know.
But when you're growing up as well, just ridiculous amounts of milk.
I used to drink milk every day as a kid. I didn't turn out tall.
Yeah, well, look what would have happened if you didn't have drunk milk.
If only I'd lived in the swamp. Anyway. I wonder what the national animal of the Netherlands is. Is it Shrek?
I don't know. I'll look it up.
Sorry for our Dutch friends, just teasing. But anyway, as you can see, they surged, and this was a big surprise to everyone. Under Dutch electoral procedure, the results of the regional elections will determine the allocation of Senate seats in May. The result will give the BBB power to block the controversial nitrogen emission legislation in the Dutch Senate and provide the party with control over regional councils to enact state policy. So this is fantastic. Like I said, I don't understand Dutch politics, and I'm not saying that I'm in any way informed, but being able to block legislation about these nitrogen emissions, I mean, the biodiversity will just have to suffer. It will have to be nitrogen-tolerant plants that grow in the swamps, rather than nitrogen-intolerant plants in the swamps, as far as I'm concerned.
If only there was another part of the world that existed.
Yes. Well, no, we went over the WEF's plan for the biodiversity, and essentially they want to turn about a third of Europe into biodiverse protected areas. It's like, who agreed to this? Not the average Dutch farmer. That's bloody who.
I also just love the idea that's like, oh, well, the Netherlands, it makes all this food, but there's no biodiversity. I was like, it's almost... Imagine if there was a other part of the world than the Netherlands that existed.
The Netherlands,
then we might be able to have the biodiversity there instead of where we make all the food.
You would think so. You think that would be a good idea, but no. Because the Netherlands feeds about a quarter of Europe or something like that. It was ridiculous. Like, there's a huge amount of food that's produced in the Netherlands that goes to France, Germany, Belgium, and Britain. Massive.
Yeah, like you couldn't pick the worst place to go.
No.
I mean, you'd rather turn all of Poland
We've got
into a nature reserve.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a country that's incredibly heavily densely populated and has like a layered tradition of advanced agriculture. I mean, Eastern Europe is mostly underpopulated, so you could have used that. But instead, we're going for the very central heart of agriculture production. Anyway, so why did this happen? And it turns out that essentially this happened because the Dutch voter, the average Dutch voter, is actually not terribly different to the average British voter, actually. Probably the average French voter as well. They're disenfranchised with their politics because they can see that, frankly, things are going ahead without their consent, and they don't approve. If only the British voter would pay attention to what the Dutch have done here. Pick a new party, and just vote them into power and then do the opposite of what the WEF control parties want. If only they would do this, right? But the British voter is, of course, not going to do that. But a recent poll by one research bureau that I can't pronounce in the Netherlands found that half of people disagreed with the statement, in general, I feel my voice is heard. So basically, half of the Dutch voters they're not listening to us. That's true. They're not. They're literally not. And the other half are stupid and don't realise they're not being listened to. The majority believe they had no say in what the government did. The sentiment was strongest in the provinces furthest from The Hague, and when asked to choose a word from a list that best described their feelings about politics, the dominant sentiment was, quote, distrust. Hope scored no higher than 12%. 12% of the Dutch, at most, were like, yeah, I'm hopeful for the future. 51% was like, I don't trust what's going on. And probably that's only because their own government has declared war on the farmers.
That's how you know you're doing a good job as Prime Minister. Only 12% of the country believe in you.
Yes, indeed. But anyway, so like I said, I'm afraid I don't have terribly deep understanding of Dutch politics. But it is nice for us to have a win. It's nice for us to be able to say, here's some good news. The Dutch are actually doing something about the WEF in their country.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Brokenomics series, this episode on face masks with Hector Drummond. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.